What up? Welcome back to
Welcome back.
On the Rocks, episode 4.
Yeah, we're ready.
We're ready.
We are ready. We weren't last week.
No, we weren't.
No,
Chaos.
last week was a little rough. Yeah, the last couple episodes, I think we were a little bit out of it. I think we got too focused on structure and segmenting, and we got a little bit away from the storytelling.
Yep.
And so we wanted to do a quick recap, right? Episode 1 was...
Episode 1 was we gave our story and we kind of winging it. We gave our ratings for the 12 facets of wealth, where we thought we were. So it was kind of impromptu. Episode 2 was starting before we're ready. That one ran longer.
It did. The first one was really long.
Yeah, the first one was really long, but we were in a groove in that one. And the second and third one, we tried to bring some segmenting and some formality, and maybe we did it a little too much. So we're learning. And episode 3 was about the chaos, and to us, we felt like it was chaotic. So we're bringing it back because we want to get back on to what we would like as our branding.
Yeah, so I think when we talked about starting before you're ready, we had a really good episode about that. Talked really at length about what it's like to kind of put that cart in front of the horse a little bit. And I think that window of time where you're starting before you're ready is not just that one episode where we recapped it. Yep. This whole process is really attributable to that. We're still there, right? Yep. Every week we talk about, did we do it the right way? What would we fix? What would we do differently? And I think that's what we're really calling out here is that one of those pillars of the rhombus link is storytelling. Mm-hmm. And that's where we felt that we could bring value. We talked about value last week. But really, we wanted to make sure that we're kind of offering out the assessment, right? So we've talked a little bit about the wealth assessment and the self-wealth assessment as it pertains to the 12 facets of wealth that we did on episode 1, where we recapped it a little bit, but it was very brief. It was a little impersonal, and so we wanted to kind of take it back to that, not only just to recap and re-rate and kind of document our ratings, because I went back and did that this week. I put my ratings on paper, and man,
you're saying
I beat the crap out of myself, which is, I think that's how it starts, though, right?
Yeah,
you want to be a little critical.
Yep. I mean, and that's a lesson learned. That's one of them. And the other one really being, we really want to be a face for consistency. So even though we started before we were ready, we're still consistent because that's what we're going to get out of this. And that's how we're going to improve. And that's how we're going to gain on this wealth journey.
Yeah, I think that's kind of that last call out before we move into the assessment. And we'll do the assessment and then we'll kind of shift to a quick recap on what we're each going to focus on for the next week. And I think that may be sort of the format we take forward. But looking back, it felt just a little bit too forced. We were a little bit too rigid, too structured. And when we talk about the storytelling piece, that's what we feel is what our strength is. And so we're going to try to kind of be a little bit more brief, really focus on the time overall. Yep. And kind of navigate this episode, take you back through the 12 aspects of wealth. And then what we'll do is kind of recap that assessment, offer that to you guys and be able to make that accessible. Yep. We'll kind of talk about that, where it's going to be available to you on the back end.
Yeah. So why is assessing ourselves even important, first of all? And to me, it's how you grow. Like, how can you measure your growth, your self-development, if you don't know where you are currently, where you've come from? So that's why we're going to do the assessment here on this episode, and we're also going to make it available for you, the audience, to be able to take it too, because for us, we want to make this a quarterly thing so that we can see our growth and be able to progress on this wealth journey.
I'm really excited about not just the conversation, but the assessment itself. So Brent put a lot of time putting this together, and we've talked about it offline more so than online. But it really is that pen to paper. Mm-hmm. Again, I talked about how I felt like I beat myself up a little bit, but it gives you such a visualization of how you review or how you see yourself. And that's not, again, we talk about that intention of really evaluating how you focus on your time and where you put your efforts and where you devote your energy. And this is exactly what we're talking about, that whether you follow along consciously or whether this is just something that crosses your mind throughout the week, that's kind of what we want to do. We don't want to just take over and have everybody focus on this on the level that we do necessarily. We just want to be there, right? Yep. Just to every now and then have a crush on, I missed on the physical part. I missed my workout this morning, and now I feel off. Or my energy's low. Our energy was low last week and a little bit even the week before. But we're acknowledging that, right? And so to put that on paper or to go back and be able to see that visually, that brings a whole different aspect to what we're trying to do to move forward. And so the assessment itself, I don't know if you want to bring it up and kind of review it as a whole,
Yep,
and then we'll kind of break it down one by one.
And I think you nailed it when you said we were able to look back and see that our energy was low. So that's a big part of being able to assess it, because if we weren't giving that attention or noticing it, then we never would have realized that we need to up it.
Exactly, right. It's the attention you pay to each of these things, and if you're really kind of focused on one and you don't recognize that, then you're never going to be able to self-correct. And so if I'm super focused on work for a week, and I kind of attributed that to the financial wealth, right? I have to make sure that I'm successful at work, to make sure that I make money, to make sure I get paid, and we are in a good place financially. But if I'm too focused on that, then maybe I lose out on community, and maybe I lose out on spiritual, and I lose focus on these other things that help balance that a little bit. And that's really part of what the journey conversation is finding the balance, recognizing where your focuses are, and deciding is it appropriate for that? Do I want to be focused on that for this week or for this day or for this hour? And if not, how do I kind of step back and refocus somewhere else? Or if it is appropriate, then I need to make sure I double down and say, yep, I'm willing to sacrifice other areas and aspects to make sure that I get this and get done what I need to be to be successful.
Yep, spot on. And as far as this assessment, this is because we're in the fourth quarter. So this current version is kind of the final beta version, but by next quarter, we're going to have something totally different, much better, more descriptive, and really allow you and us to really dig in and really set some goals and really hold ourselves accountable to these goals. So while we're on the assessment, we're going to go ahead and start. We're going to go ahead with the financial wealth part of this wealth journey. And I mean, I think when anyone talks about wealth, and we've said this multiple times, that we all think of finance first. So that's why we're putting it first. But we do have 11 to go over. But the financial part is really what it is. It's our finance. It's how we give it attention. It's where we are. It's how we look at money. It's that currency of really having the life that we want. So it's a very important part of that. So
yeah, I think so. This is, again, we look at these in different ways as far as the ratings go, as far as how we approach each of the aspects of wealth, in the sense that I kind of have rated myself in the way that I've focused on each one over the last 3 months. So we break it down by quarter, and Brent's talked about, Q4 always being that fourth quarter is the moment of clutch, right? Who steps up? How do you make sure that you finish the game? Things like that. And so for us, Q4 in this scenario is really the level set, right? It's a free quarter to kind of figure out what we're doing, how we're doing it. And the way that I've kind of taken on the rating system for myself is, what's my focus, right? How focused have I been on my financial wealth and successes over the last 3 months? And that's how I've kind of balanced that competency rating at the same time. So we talked a little bit about weighted goals, right? It's not just about how financially secure I am necessarily, it's how focused am I on being successful financially. And for me, man, I can't even find where my ratings went. Oh, it's a 6. So I rated myself a 6. And so that to me is, I'm relatively focused on it. I think in a way I'm always focused on the financial aspect, right? You have to be. That's part of being an adult and being a parent and being a husband. That you have to concern yourself with finances and what bills are paid, where you're spending your money, how you create that discipline within your children. That kind of segues into discipline and even generational wealth. So I think that's where my approach to it has been. And so I think that's where we kind of want to make sure that each one that we rate and talk about, we let you, as far as the audience or any contributors go, you determine how you want to rate yourself in a way.
It's going to be different for everyone. At least a little different.
Yeah, but for me, it's kind of like, what's my focus on it then? How concentrated have I been on that wealth aspect for the last couple of months? And that's balanced with, where would I rate myself as far as success goes? And so that somewhere lies in the middle there. And so we're interested, really, again, we keep coming back to it. We're interested to see where you guys fall, right? What was your take on it? Where did you rate yourselves? And what is the focus for that aspect of wealth moving into the next quarter?
So, and what we forgot to mention too, this is a rating out of 10, with there being 12 areas. It's going to give you a total base no higher than 120. So we'll add these up later. And I'm going to go ahead and rate myself a 5. Looking at, I know that I have big goals. This has been a huge focus for me. It's really the area that has got me into furthering my self-development. And so with that, I know where my goals are, and I'm kind of putting my rating on where my goal is and how I'm approaching that goal. So right now I feel like I'm right in the middle. I'm very focused on the learning, the literature part of it, and then I'm taking it from there.
And so not to give a spoiler out or anything, but when our end category is always going to be the missing link, that segment at the end of the show where we talk about either something we learned or what we're taking away into the next week. But I would guess that financial wealth is always going to be part of your focus, no matter what other one you're focused on, at least for the time being, right? That was really the generator of this entire conversation, is how do I expand my knowledge and develop?
Yes, because increasing financial literacy has actually touched on everything else. Like whenever you read anything financially, it is really teaching you all these other areas. It's not saying how you get more money.
But so in my mind, and this is where it's such an interesting conversation, at least to me again. Sure. But I would say that about any of them.
Yeah,
I really would. Like I'd say, all right, if I'm working on my community wealth, right, and I'm worried about how I impact my community or what my circle of friends is, that trickles down into every other aspect of wealth as well. But that was just a side comment, but
yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think you're exactly right.
Social wealth. So this was the one that I personally was really hard on myself on, because I will say that I had a pretty good week as far as trying to stay in touch with people, texting back pretty regularly, and I narrow it down to that only because that's my interpretation of it, and that's my focus when it comes to social wealth. But I had a couple of really good conversations. I had a buddy, Carlos, who had a rough week. One of my college buddies from Florida. Had a little bit of a rough week, but we had a really good conversation, 45 minutes on one of my drives home. And it was just really good to reconnect with him. And that changed my energy. It changed my influence. It changed everything walking in the door when I got home. But it was twofold. We talked about energy kind of being two different directions, not only the energy you receive from others, but that you put out. And that's where it kind of comes back to that social aspect. If you put the time into the social aspect and you really concentrate on that wealth regarding how you interact with people around you and those that are important to you, it can trickle down into other things. And so for me, in my network, in my circle, the social wealth for me this week was much better. But again, I'm sticking to that too, just as far as generally speaking, because I've always struggled with it, and I think it's always going to be my opportunity.
I'm doing the same. I rated myself a 3 last time, and I stuck with it because it's where I need improvement. Like I want to. Casey pointed out in episode 1 that in a social setting, like we both feel like we're great. Right, once
we're in it.
Yes, once we're in it. But there's some social practices that I still just need improvement on, like calling people back and actually setting the time aside to actually talk to the people that I care about. I think we kind of agree on where we're at both for social. And everybody's going to interpret that at least a little differently. But I think it's that give and take.
And when you talk about one that maybe pervades the other as much as anything, I would give physical wealth that moniker.
Okay.
I would say physical wealth to me is the one that inherently impacts every other aspect of wealth for me personally. In the sense that we talked about, I gave this story a couple weeks ago about how we went to the fair and then we went to King's Dominion, and I was really bad about staying hydrated, and it took me like 2 days to come out of that fog mentally, and that ultimately impacted what I felt was my performance on the podcast last week. And that was a week later. And so I think for me, again, all of them sort of intertwine and intermingle, but physical wealth to me is the one. It's not necessarily about working out or being, jacked and ripped and all these things. It's just the simple, the concept that your body is your vessel that carries you through everything else. And so if you don't take care of it, you're going to be hurting. You're not going to be able to focus. You're not going to be able to think straight. You can't communicate the right way. And then you lose out on all these other things and you start to slip in as far as the other 11 aspects go.
Yep, and physical wealth was the originator for me. It's what really got me into shape, and that's mentally too. Like once I started taking my physical, once I started giving it priority, it started to shape everything, every other wealth category for me, I started to care about because I started seeing results. That was one of the big things. That's probably what held me back.
It's tangible, right?
Yeah,
it's visible.
Right, but you almost kind of didn't go into it because it's like I'm not gonna be able to keep this up. I'm not gonna be consistent. Right, I want these goals. I've kind of fallen off, but
every morning I wake up early after I hit the snooze button a couple of times. And I finally get up out of bed. And most days, even when I wake up early enough that I could go downstairs and get in the gym that we have in the basement and get a quick 15, 20 minute workout in, I come up with some other reason or excuse or thing to do that doesn't get me there. And then I think, one day doesn't hurt me. But the one day adds to 2 days, adds to 3 days. And
it feeds in everything else. It feeds into energy and your spirit. And,
well, like I said, we both told the story about when we were way far out of shape and we were in bad physical situations and it was a concerted effort to get back on track, and that was probably for both of us the thing that sort of corrected us throughout in the road of our entire lives. That's the thing that got us back on track for the most part. But yeah, so I think physical wealth is one that
would you rate yourself again?
A 4.
Okay.
As far as focus goes, I mean
I rated myself a 7, although this week it's probably been a 4.
10.
Huh?
I'd give you a 10.
Well, I almost feel like I'm slacking.
I get a watch update from you every day.
Yes, it's because it is a huge focus. That's because we'll get into that.
There you go.
We'll get into that discipline, but it's really the discipline that is why you get those notifications that I've worked out, because that area I'm good at. But
that's
as
a
far as the
perfect
physical
example of that conversation, right? It's not that you're a 7 or an 8 as far as where you want to necessarily be physically. It's how well you've been focused on it and how consistent you've been about it.
Sure.
So that's where that 7 comes from a little bit, right?
Sure. Have you ever started a workout routine and wanted to know, like, okay, where am I going to end up? Like, how am I going to keep up with this? And your goal is right there, but it almost takes up too much space mentally to where you're like, man, I can't just be thinking about this. Like it's like your soul, like if maybe for
that's the dangerous part of the physical wealth, right?
But I've gotten into it, and this is why I rate myself highly on this, is because I get to a point where it is high on my priority list, but it doesn't take up as much mental space. It's almost had it now. So instead of being like, oh, I have to make sure I work out because I'm watching my calories. So now I don't count calories anymore.
Yeah, but it's transitional, right? Like when you first started up, you have to get yourself to focus on it until it becomes habit.
Yes.
And so it's this struggle when it first comes in. It's almost a blocker, right? First to even get your ass off the couch and go do it to begin with is one thing, but then to be consistent about it is the second hurdle that you have to overcome. And then as you transition into habit and expectation and normalcy, that's when it becomes second thought. And then you don't have to, that hyper focus on it to start becomes a lot easier to just become part of your norm. And then that allows you to focus on other aspects and kind of transition away from it on the back end.
Yep.
Freedom wealth. This is the control of your time, or your viewpoint as far as time and time management goes, right?
Yep.
For me, this one was a 6. This one, it's a little bit harder to define, but for me it was how I control my mentality and my viewpoints. For me it was when I used to commute and I'd get stuck in traffic or I'd be so frustrated about my day, I would let that trickle into other areas of my life. So when I came home, I was really bad about leaving work outside the door and even in some cases leaving my home life outside the door at work.
Yep.
And so I think that's where controlling that time and that attitude and that mentality is the focus here.
Yeah. And for me, I rated it a 5, and a lot for me is I just don't have the balance of work and play like I want. Right? So like right now,
what do you consider the podcast?
Both.
Is it?
And probably more play than work. So the editing the editing is work, right? Trying to figure stuff out on the back end is a bit of the work. This part's play.
Okay.
This part
it needs to be. It should be.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's what our takeaway, and that's kind of a really good summary of what we were talking about earlier, that this needs to be enjoyable for us in order to be enjoyable for anybody else.
But even the reading is work and play.
Yeah.
Like I enjoy I enjoy learning and stuff like that. So that's where I do I do spend some of my free time, but but again, when it comes back to that discipline, I am disciplined in a way where everything like outside of work, when I come home, I do not let that drag me down for the things that I want to do. If I had the energy to spend at work, then I have the energy to spend on my hobbies, my family, the things that I love to do, the play. But I still bring, again, I still bring in some of that work, and work takes up such a big part of my day that I really want to get to the point where a job is not my main income.
Yeah, and I think we're both almost blurring the line a little bit between freedom wealth and energy wealth, right? Mm-hmm. There is a kind of a time, or not a time, but a little bit of a blurred line there in the gray area. So I think the way that you attribute your time, the way you control your time and your mentality, that is your energy.
Yep.
But yeah, so again, just last little point on that one. We both kind of talked about work and making sure that we're careful about how our behaviors are within each confine of time and where those buckets of time are concentrated. But the thing that's always stood out to me and the thing that I used to struggle with, and I think that I'm better about now, is that work should never get a better version of you than home, right? Your family should never get the second-rate version of Brand or Casey, and I think it took me a long time to learn that, right? I was so focused on career and goals and title and money that I think my time got way too skewed in that direction, and I really fell short for a little while. But I do try very hard to be cognizant of that, and again, leave the baggage at the door, walk across it, make sure you take advantage of the time you've got within each of those buckets.
That's dope. I like that. I like how you worded that. Yep.
All right. Spiritual
wealth. So I'm gonna start, and I rated myself.
I'm still. The jury's still out for me on this.
Okay. I rated myself a 7, and again, spiritual is really the heart, like your morals, your principles, your purpose, your relationship with God, and that's really something that I've worked on a lot lately. Meditation. I'm inviting meditation for more than one reason. Really for physical, mental, and spiritual. So that's become a big focus for me. I've seen results from it. It makes me feel good. So I'm really in that part of because I'm seeing the growth is why I gave myself a higher rating than I think I do for some of the other ones.
Yeah, and I think I always let myself jump to a conclusion when it comes to spiritual wealth when we talk about it at a high level. And I go back to the religiosity of it, the very literal spiritual or religious belief that can be attributed to it. And I think you do a really good job of breaking it down into something that's a little bit different. It's not just about your relationship with God or any deity that you worship, but it's really about your ethics, your morals. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why, so I'm going back now, and I'm glad that I wrote that down, because I rated myself a 7, which if I'm only focused on the religious aspect and my faith aspect, I've struggled with that for years. And I talked about that again a little bit, especially recently, where we had miscarriages back to back before we had Eleanor. And that really doesn't go hand in hand with blind faith, right? It makes it very difficult to do those things, and we'll explore that later. I think that's, again, something we want to come back to before we go too far down that path. But when you talk about the other aspects of what spiritual wealth is, that's where I think I do a pretty good job of holding myself accountable. I think that I've got a relatively strong moral compass. And again, it's not to pat myself on the back. I think we talked about how we wish on some of these that someone else could rate us.
Sure, and this is one of them.
But yeah, so I think that's one that I'm looking forward to exploring more, not only within the show, but within myself.
Got it. Yep. All right. And then now we're going to go to Solical Wealth, which when we first talked about this, and in researching this, it's kind of hard to define, but it's really your emotions. And if you sit back and think, right, you do things that please you, right? You're pleasing the soul. So there's all these versions of you inside of your head that really want to be the best version of you. And then we also have that side of us that argues and, gives into the temptations and the temporary reliefs that maybe more discipline would bring to our higher self.
Yeah.
Right. So when we look at Solical, I rated myself a 5 because there's plenty of room to grow there. But when it comes to managing stress and managing the emotions and actually strengthening the mind, it's something that I'm working on. So I kind of give myself that middle of the pack because I really want to define it more for myself. But I do know that it's a focus, right? Because the Soliloquy is that mind and emotion part and pleasing the soul. And I think that is a bigger focus than it ever has been now. So it's something I'm working on, and it's one I want to see myself grow in.
Yeah, I think we both kind of landed on this one that we didn't know enough about what we wanted it to be or how to define it, and so we both struggled to rate ourselves. So I think we both landed on 5. And again, you mentioned in your research, and this is one that I think about throughout the week when we're going and recapping and listening and making notes and things. And to me, when you mentioned, I fell into the trap of looking at this one very literally, like the literal soul that people have as far as the thought that this thing within your body that goes to heaven or hell or whatever, again, whatever belief you have. But it's not really that literal. It's more about your emotions and your thoughts and your feelings. And when you help define that, for me, that allowed me to step back, and I try to read a lot of like Marcus Aurelius, and I am interested very much in Stoicism, things like that, the id versus the ego, and things that help you philosophically in your approach to life. And so that's where I've kind of tried to make sure that I'm reading and educating myself, and I like to align myself with those beliefs and those thoughts and those mentalities. I'm not great at it all the time, but that's where I see myself going with the Soliloquy aspect, is how can I become calmer and deeper and more philosophical, and coming across as fake.
What's the quote you gave? If you give me an hour to chop down a tree, or if you give me 10 minutes.
So Abraham Lincoln's famous for saying, if you gave me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 sharpening my axe.
Yep.
And so that's where the way that you think about things and you problem solve and you approach life, I think that's kind of a good segue into that one.
Yep, I like that.
So creative wealth. This one's weird for me. This is sort of transitional and kind of up and down, depending on what I'm doing and where my focus is with everything else. But
sure.
For this one, I don't spend as much time trying to be functionally creative or literally creative. I rated myself a 3 on this one, but again, this is one that I think when we go back and focus on these week over week and have more conversations about what each one is, I think I'll be able to tell some stories about when I was younger and the things I was able to do then when it comes to visual arts and things like that. That's what I kind of grew up doing. That's where I think back and kind of consider my creativity. But current state, I think I struggle with this one. I was a 3.
Okay. I mean, I rated myself an 8. This is my bread and butter. Like I've always considered myself an artist in many aspects, in music, in artistry, drawing, painting, writing. I mean, it's just kind of who I am. I grew up with that, and I still live in it. Like it's a big part of me. And I brought this up on episode 1. Like when I see it in my kids, like it brings the biggest smile.
Right.
Like to see, and I think I recognize it. I think I have like a keen eye to see like creativity.
But I think you say this is your bread and butter. You couldn't be more right. And this is the not the personification, but the exemplification of that. This podcast, the Rhombus Link, the 2 books you've written, the vlog, like all of these things are you creating something in your mind and being able to bring it to fruition. And
that is where I pride myself. Like
it's crazy.
I live in my imagination, and I try my best to show others. And even when I'm nervous, like
let alone multiple books.
Right.
It's just insane to me.
And working on another one, which I don't necessarily. I talked about limited belief. I don't want the next one to be just a book. Like I really want to move out of my comfort and really think that I can make it something else.
Can we know about it?
Well, yeah, you probably saw it. Yes.
Oh, I can't wait for that.
Yes.
And the concept of that book is phenomenal to me.
Yep, and
it is the story of basketball from the viewpoint of the ball.
Sure,
right?
that is part of it.
Okay.
The main character in it has the bigger aspect, but yes.
And I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
What is it? Ball don't lie.
No, well,
what was the word?
It's had different versions.
Okay.
It's been check ball. It's been
check ball. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and it's
Ball don't lie is a good one.
if anybody, if you watch Atlanta, the show Atlanta, Atlanta has some aspects of it where it drifts off from the main storyline, and it's a big influence for this too.
Okay.
That's why I really want to make it something other than just writing it down, and I really want to put it in
Just gonna say,
other media.
Ball Don't Lie is pretty good title.
Yeah, yes, I think.
All right, community wealth.
Did I get my? Yeah, okay.
Did you?
No,
Yeah.
influential wealth actually.
Where are we at?
Influential wealth.
Did I skip that one?
You did.
Man. So influential wealth is a 3. And you actually kind of called me, you checked me on this, because I sort of went back to that whole social aspect, right? That I struggle to stay in touch. I struggle to keep my network thriving. But you called me out to say, well, what about in the work aspect? And again, I have tried very hard to kind of not go into the path of talking about work all the time, because that historically has been something I feel like I've focused way too much that defines who I am. But in that regard, I do have influence, and I think I am successful in it. I've had progression in my career almost without exception from one position to the next. And so I do think that that's a good call out. I think it's worthwhile to say that while I rated myself a 3, I think this is one that when I reevaluate next quarter, that I'll probably see maybe the biggest jump.
Okay, I like it. And this is also the one you called me out on, because I rated myself a 1. I stuck with it, even though you brought up a good point, and I'm still sticking with it, because for me, I think it's the one that I want to see the biggest jump.
Yeah.
So it's probably the one that I think, even being hard on myself, is going to be the lowest, because I want it to be one of the highest.
Yeah.
So I want to see the biggest jump in this one. So I'm putting it at a 1, even though I have blogs out there. I've had other audiences that I've been able to reach and relate to and connect with. I do have books out there. There's just more that I want to do when it comes to widening the audience and being able to influence people, especially for good.
Yeah, and I think that's where this kind of calls back that first conversation we had on this episode, that in order to be influential, I think you have to be genuine, right? And if you come across as fake or contrived or forced, then people will disengage. And I think that's what our concern was from last week, is that we were trying too hard to fit a mold that we weren't comfortable in yet. So I think that's where we're talking about with this, is that we want to make sure that we come across as who we are, and the way that we communicate in a normal capacity is how we want to come across to you guys. And it's also, we talk about how we've been able to call each other out, not to, again, to go back to it, but
Sure.
we want to engage with the audience too. We want to bring you guys into these conversations so that you guys can call us out and be like, hey, I either know you, or this is what I see, or anything like that, and I disagree, and this is what I would think. And so those are the conversations that long term we want to really start to engage with the audience.
And I'm all for that vulnerability, to put myself out there.
Agreed.
To be able to
We're
connect
asking
with somebody.
for it, right?
Yep. To be able to connect with someone, and someone be able to call me or call me out and say the same thing as how you and I talk about it and call each other out. I'd love that interaction with the audience as
100%.
well. And then
Community?
and then we look at community wealth. It's really the same thing. It's really it has the same impact as influential, but it's really, instead of that larger worldly kind of audience, it's really the ones that you're around in your community, your family and friends, a bit of that. And for me, this is the one I told you I changed one. So I realized in the first episode that I gave myself an 8, because I had some very specific callbacks.
Yeah.
And if I broaden it out, to more than just a few examples, it's not quite where I want to be. Again, I want that influence on the community. I would like it to be better. I think I do have some kind of presence there. I do contribute to society in a very fair manner. But I did knock that one down to 5 to be more realistic, and to also go with where I would want as far as goal wise.
Yeah, I think you do a good job in the first sentence of this breakdown on the assessment itself. You talk about this is where you stand within your influential wealth, and I think that's such a great callback to influential wealth, in the sense that they are two very different things, but community is very strongly and directly impacted by by your focus on your influential wealth. So where you are as far as influence goes and how you influence and your reach of influence directly is correlated to your community wealth, which is very different. That is your standing within the community, both locally and broader. So I think that was a really good call out. I can't remember really why, I'll have to go back and rewatch it, but I was a 7.
Okay.
Maybe that's when I was thinking about work.
Do you not agree with that one? Or?
I don't necessarily. As far as like community involvement and stuff like that, we're not great about it. As much as I want to be, and maybe that's something that I'll focus on, you know, how I create more time for myself, but not there yet.
Gotcha.
So, generational wealth. This one was tough for me.
Yeah, this I think it goes back into, it's because it deals so much with the future that it's hard to rate now. And even for myself, where did I rate myself on this? I rated myself a 4 because I'm not where I want to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And as far as, but it is something that I'm working on. I do work on, you know, building the memories, right? Because we talked about generational wealth being more than just finances. So especially I have my finance rating, but as far as what I'm going to discuss as far as generation is going to be outside of that, because it does deal with finance, but it also deals with the memories and the knowledge and everything else that you pass down to the future generation.
So I'm going to try to explain what's going on in my head very briefly, but I think things like community and generational, those are like, I would bucket those into what I'm calling in my mind, and this just came through, but those would be why wealth. Like, why do I focus on influence, and why do I focus on financial? And those would be action wealth. Right? So I'm actively looking into the financial aspect of it. I'm actively looking into how I influence people. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to further influence my generational wealth. So there's different versions of wealth, and how you're impacting one because of the focus you put into another can kind of segue into that. But I don't think I'm explaining that way, but I do want, like, I'm gonna that's a working philosophy, I guess.
Either way, I got exactly what you're saying, and I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. I was a 5 on generational wealth, by the way.
Gotcha.
And so just turning the page to discipline, I rated myself a 4, and I thought I would have given myself a little more credit on that.
Is this what you rated yourself last time too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, I went back and got my rating, so I wanted to use that first because that was such a just, we didn't even think about it, we didn't talk too much about it. Even the rating system came about within that episode. So
I did the same, except for the only one I did change was community.
Yeah.
So we are now on wealth of discipline. Again, I talked about this earlier. I rated myself high on this again, really because discipline has been what allows me to achieve any goal. I've made it a focus to change bad habits to good habits, and the reason I do even see results is because of discipline. Yeah.
So for me, discipline was a 4, and oddly enough, in my mind, I really primarily focus that on like the physical wealth, right? Because I constantly think of going down to the gym, or I think of doing these things to get myself in better shape, or take a walk at lunch, or whatever it is, but I fail to do it.
Sure.
So I kind of am a little bit harder on myself in that regard. But, you know, when it comes to like work, last week we talked about time hacks and productivity hacks, and I really tried to focus on the 2-minute rule as far as one of the ones we talked about last week, which is if a task can be done in less than 2 minutes, to do it right away so it doesn't build up into something more. I really tried to focus on that this week at work, and I felt that I was successful with it. So I am right in that middle, I think, as far as how I focus on it. So I'm sticking with that 4 for right now. And I think the big one for us this week was energy wealth.
It was energy wealth. It had a big impact on my daily. I really felt down, although overall I rated myself a 7 because the last couple of weeks are not typical for me. Even when it is work versus play, and if I don't have that balance, I still normally try to be vibing. I still try to connect. I still try to give off good energy and have that energy for myself to accomplish anything that I'm looking to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about one that impacts the other, this is the one that I go back to say that, you know, that comment I made about work shouldn't get a better version of you than home. I think this is the one that I try to always be cognizant of, and it's one of the harder ones to really be all in on all the time.
Yeah.
It's hard to be 100% happy or positive, even 50% of the time.
For sure.
But that's kind of the whole conversation, right? That's what life is. That's what existentialism is, and it's your philosophy and approach to life, and your outlook on life, and how you put that energy out into the world. So that's kind of a deeper, conversation and discussion that we'll get into once we get to that episodic version of when we talk about energy wealth.
Yep, and I think another big reason for me is I think I'm good at blocking out energy drainers. So as soon as I recognize that it's something that's not for me, like I don't want that negativity, or like I'm good at blocking it out and tuning it out. So
I've never really paid that much attention to it.
Yeah, but
everything is what it is to me. I say that a lot, actually. Now that I've said it a lot.
What, that it is what it is?
Yeah, I'm very.
I think that would be good for your energy if you say it is
instead of just letting things be, just focus on what I should be attributing my energy to.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
Good stuff. All right. So yeah, that was
the 12.
Yeah, so that was. I mean, we went through ours. We'll have the links available.
Yep, absolutely.
We'll have it available on the YouTube channel, the Instagram On The Rocks.
Link in the bio.
Profile. Yep.
Link in the bio.
I can connect it to the podcast. And I have a webpage on the Rhombus link that will give you the link to.
Yeah.
Again,
and so we'll get to the point where we start to kind of interact with that, but we just invite you to look at it, review it, read through it. Rate yourselves if you're up for it.
Yeah, even if you write it down on a piece of paper right now, like it's I feel that it's important. If this is something that you're looking to take the journey on this with, like put it down on paper somehow.
Yeah. So before we get out of here though, so we talked about the missing link. That is one segment that we kind of want to always stay true to, is that's the either the value add or what we're working on, something that we feel we're missing in our lives that we wanted to bring value to, either internally or to you guys. So for your missing link for the next week, what are the two wealths you're going to focus on?
2, physical and spiritual.
Okay. So I'm going, oh man, I asked you and I was ready. I'm going to do physical and energy. I'm tying those two together. I really want to try to make sure that not only that we're bringing energy to you guys, because I think that's valuable for you, but to my kids, to my wife, to my work, to myself. I think that's what I want to make sure that I'm putting out into the world.
I like it.
All right, so that's what we'll work on next week. We'll kind of recap what we did to kind of reel those in a little bit, focus on those for the next couple of days. In the meantime, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Buzzsprout.
Yep, working on Apple.
Apple's coming soon. So check us out, Wealth on the Rocks, episode 4. Other than that,
yes,
we'll see you there.
Yep, we're out.
Toodles.